Alright guys, so in this video I played Rise of the Tomb Raider in 2023 for the first time. I'll be giving an overall review and my thoughts on the game to let you know if it still holds up over 8 years after releasing in 2015. In the video before this I played through the 2013 Tomb Raider game, and of course Shadow of the Tomb Raider will be next. If you go on to enjoy or find this video helpful, hit that like button down below, and if story video games are your thing, maybe even consider subscribing to the channel. I have an array of reviews on the channel with a playlist of the last series I've done in the description down below, and my last video will be on the screen at the end of this video. Now let's jump into Rise of the Tomb Raider. Now in this trilogy, the overall gameplay is going to be very similar, with no massive overhaul in mechanics from the first game, as in my last review the game revolved around exploring the island of Yamatai, and focused on a lot of parkour to traverse through the map, crafting weapon upgrades to become stronger in combat, and all of this is no different in Rise of the Tomb Raider, and I'm sure will carry on in the third game. The alterations in the gameplay that was already present just feel and look much better, this being the much smoother movement when parkouring, fluid animations, incredible visuals, much more variety in combat which I'll get into. Therefore the difference in gameplay isn't necessarily what's changed but more so what they've added, as all the other aspects near enough stay the same but just much better as I mentioned. This could be seen as a bad thing, as people might think it's very lazy and overall it feels like the same game, but I loved the first game and I feel like a lot of other people did as well. And it is exactly what Tomb Raider is all about, so if they started to change and adjust so many features, then it just would not feel like Tomb Raider. And maybe some people will prefer a feature what it used to be like before, so at the end of the day it's quite hard to please everyone. But you get what you expect, and I do feel them going down this route was a safe yet good option. Now as to what was added and not switched out or changed, as there wasn't a lot of that, the customization has been extended out with so many skills and perks to upgrade your weapons, as well as being able to craft so many more weapons, such as a variety of bows, this being the makeshift, recurve, and a compound bow. The same with arrows as well, these being poison arrows to throw off an enemy or animal, and it is really helpful, and of course a new item. Then there's explosive arrows to destroy barricades and blow up enemies from far distances, which never got old. Then there's fire arrows as well to also set alight barricades and enemies, as well as different handguns, rifles, shotguns, and an SMG in the game. There's also more melees like a combat knife that can be used to cut down a rope, which is used in the many puzzles and adds more variety to them. A Molotov that can be crafted on the go at a click of a button, if you pick up a bottle of course, which was a very cool way to do it instead of having to go to a camp all the time and then craft a handful of bottles you collect, for example. Instead you can pick them up off the ground mid-combat and craft them in 2 seconds. The same goes with many other handheld explosives like shrapnel grenades, this being from the cans you pick up and the ore you mine. It was extremely helpful in fights with them being so common, and extended on to that not only customization but more variety in the fights that keep you immersed, because you actually have to craft them mid-battle without it becoming too much of a hassle so that it's annoying and difficult. It does emphasise that more intense survival feeling. They also added a customization option for Lara, with a huge selection of outfits to choose from which all look great. The stealth attacks are more varied in animation instead of the same bow over the neck takedown in the first game, which easily became repetitive. Now you do come across a lot of enemies in the game compared to the first. It may feel like too much to some players as they just don't stop compared to the first game. It does feel a lot less lonely in the world, and this will make sense when I talk about the story, but I quite like it, and this means it doesn't really become boring because there's so much action, and with the new gameplay and combat features they added, there's much more experimentation to do in the fight, so it makes sense to be more of it. Overall it's more of a challenge that obviously isn't too difficult. Then there's more in terms of traversing and parkour, this being the ability to scramble, which is a small feature but adds more to movement instead of just jogging and crouching. With a click of a button, Lara will scramble across the floor, which helps with stealth to not easily get seen when moving over to another barrier. Basically just a crouch sprint. This is also applied with simply running, where you can fully sprint in this game, and this makes the chase and parkour scenes much more fast paced and fun and immersive. There's also a new gadget called a wire spool, which is basically a wire to help you jump and then swing across a large gap or climb climb up the wire to a high up ledge, making the parkour slightly less repetitive and very fun because it's pretty much a grapple gun, similar to Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Of course, there's the same aspects I was talking about, like running up wall edges, the rope launcher to shoot at an area which will come crashing down to the ground as you pull it, the same ability to craft your own zipline which was in the first game as well, by attaching the rope and also being able to move the rope with a wheel. That was different. That helps to ascend an item into the air or hold it in a certain position. I do feel like the rope launcher was promoted more in this game, especially in the puzzles, which involved it a lot more and was quite different, and once again added to that variation in the puzzles to not become the same. There was a new feature of pushing certain objects and puzzles like a cart to either help you climb up a high up place or break a blocked area. Of course, the usual climbing axes as well that were present in the first game, which were basically the same this time round, just feeling a lot more smooth when traversing, so the parkour did get a handful of new features that made it more engaging than it already was. Without saying any major spoilers and only a few events that happen very early on in the game, the story of Rise of the Tomb Raider follows Lara Croft after the events of Yamatai in the first game, and now exploring Siberia where she's on the way to search for the divine source that was apparently found a long time ago, following in her late father's footsteps to prove everyone wrong and see what her father was always researching on. What I did find a bit odd was how we sort of start the game very similar to how we started the first game. The game prompts you instantly to collect resources and hunt animals and craft weapons from the ground up, which I thought would only be done in the first game, or at least a lot less in the second game, as that was the start of Lara Croft's journey, and every game after that we would start with the selection of weapons she's already built up because she's now become Tomb Raider. I have a feeling they may have done this for anyone that didn't play the first game for whatever reason, and the developers are promoting how you can play any game in the series and still learn everything. It was just a bit strange in terms of the story, and a few items that we already found and learned in the first game are not with you at the start, you have to get them later on. Now throughout the story you are constantly met with a group called the Trinity. They are also on the same journey as Lara and trying to hunt down the divine source. The villains are one of the best parts of the story. The main antagonist called Constantine, who is adamant on finding the source and was said to be chosen by God to do so, so he's very determined to get it and will do anything. The side characters of Jacob, who's Lara's friend who she finds, and Anna, her mother, while not being the most in-depth and complex characters, they are both very important to the story, without saying too much more. With the collectibles I mentioned earlier, some of these will be audio logs that are recordings of Constantine and what his full goal is, and it gives us more information on his character. This gives his character more meaning and detail and was a great antagonist for the game overall. So that's where I end my review of Rise of the Tomb Raider in 2023. Does it still hold up? 100%. It's a much more polished and engaging than the first game, which I enjoyed anyway. I do feel like because I recommended the first game, then each one after this will most likely be the same for this whole series, because as I mentioned, overall there isn't a drastic and complete overhaul on the formula. Each game just feels very upgraded with new features in gameplay and parkour, a more complex yet easy to follow story so it doesn't get confusing, incredible graphics of course that look the same if not better than modern day releases, bearing in mind the game is 8 years old, and of course it's the same great character of Lara Croft. So if you enjoy or find this video helpful, then let me know by tapping that like button down below, and if story video games are your thing, then maybe even consider subscribing to the channel. As I mentioned, I have various reviews on the channel from an array of video games with a series in the description down below, and my last video will be on the screen now. I'm excited for the final game in the series, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Until then, thank you for watching until the end, and bye bye.